Well, moving on to something else, I think, Mick, that also deserves a lot more attention is the links between the Biden family and all sorts of strange Eastern European and Russian oligarchs. News this week that Russian business partners and associates of Hunter Biden have somehow conveniently dodged sanctions. They didn't make it onto the list over Moscow's invasion of Ukraine. And the White House is refusing to answer questions about why Russian billionaires Vladimir Yevtushenkov and Yelena Baturina, who were associates of Hunter Biden, have managed to dodge sanctions. Have a look at this.
How is he handling the conflict of interest there, given his son was a business associate of these two people? And can you confirm that as sitting vice president, he dined with Baturina in Georgetown?
I'm just not speaking to anything that's related to his son from here. If you want to ask a question about Hunter Biden specifically, I would refer you to his family.
Mick, are they for real here?
You love that reference. I haven't seen that before. If you want to ask questions about Hunter Biden, I would refer to his family. Joe Biden is his family. So that seems like it's the appropriate place to ask the questions. Look, there's connections between the Biden family and Eastern Europe. Russia, Ukraine go back almost a decade. There was a very high-profile video for a brief period of time, I don't know what happened to it, where Joe Biden was on stage as vice president admitting that he was withholding, that the federal government, at his direction, was withholding federal aid to the Ukraine until they fired an investigator that was looking into a business on which that Hunter Biden served with. So this goes deep. It's sort of disappointing just to show the status of media in my country today that this story had to be broken by PJ Media. It's a very credible source. It's a very conservative source, but it's certainly not a mainline. It's not the New York Times. It's not the Washington Post. Those are the folks you would expect to break stories like this in days past when the media actually dealt with both sides fairly. So, again, this is the type of thing that, thanks to new media, thanks to social media, it's starting to percolate up. I hope it doesn't die here. I hope that there is some transparency and that the Biden family has to explain exactly why this particular Russian oligarch is not being sanctioned by the Biden administration.
You know, Mick, I want to pick up on something really interesting you just said there about the new media breaking stories and the old media, the New York Times, the Washington Post, those sorts of people, basically running cover for the Democrats. At the start of this segment, I showed some footage of journalists from the new journalist era, Matt Taibbi, Mike Schellenberger, getting questioned by Democrats in Congress about whether they'd talk to Elon Musk and all sorts of things like that. It seems to me that in the old days, the Washington Post and the New York Times would have been absolutely furious at the idea that a journalist would be quizzed about their sources on Capitol Hill. And now, as you say, you struggle to find stories about this, anywhere other than this show and, some of the websites that are not the New York Times and CNN. What do you make of that?
The silence is deafening. And I'm not just saying this because you're a friend of mine and I enjoy doing the show. I see stuff on this show because I've been, when I'm come on TV with you, I'm usually on about half an hour. So I see about half an hour before I come on. And I see stuff on this program that I never see in the media here in the United States, including from Fox. So that the material is out there, but the traditional media sources are not driving them to the public here in the country. I just have to wonder if Trump derangement syndrome is that severe here that most media is just not going to put anything out there that makes Donald Trump look good or Joe Biden look bad. That frightens me a little bit, that's where we might be in this country, where pretty much news is no longer news, it's entertainment, and that's a very dangerous place to be.
It really, really is. It's terrible for democracy. I mean, people parading through the Capitol, put that aside. That, I think, is a real threat. And it's the way Donald Trump and his presence in anything kind of distorts the entire conversation. I remember when he said TikTok was a huge danger. It was run by China. It was spyware. Everybody said, oh, that's nonsense. Well, now the White House, to do this sort of backflip, is now backing legislation that would give the administration powers to ban TikTok apps if they think there's a national threat. Two questions here. On the one hand, there's the whole distortion of Trump, but also, is it good finally to see the Biden administration moving on an app which people have told me really is a security threat for an awful lot of people?
Yeah, I used to talk to a friend of mine, Barney Frank, who's a Democrat, when I was friends with him, and he said the biggest lie in Washington, D.C. was anything that's prefaced by saying, I hate to say so. I hate to say I told you so, but I told you so. That's a lie. Everybody loves saying that. And I just love being a Trump person coming out and saying Trump was right about China. He was right about TikTok. He was right about corruption in Ukraine. He was right about the Nord Stream to gas pipeline and the effect it had on European gas. So, yeah, you're just starting to see folks realize that Trump, for all of his failings, was right about a lot of things. And one of them was about TikTok. So I'm glad to see now there's a bipartisan group finally putting their anti-Trumpism aside to say, you know what, we didn't like this policy when it was Trump's, but he was kind of right. And we need to figure out a way to restrict this Chinese government access into so many Americans' private lives, including their cell phones and all the information that's contained there. So, look, we can sit there and commiserate all day over the fact that, Trump got it right and they ignored it. But at least now they're admitting he got it right and they're moving forward with what looks like to be the right policy.
Well, indeed, Mick, I mean, I think that with TikTok, it's not just that it is potential spyware and real spyware at that, but also just its algorithms work to make so many people, especially young people who get hooked on it, just really dumb. But anyway, let's check in on our favorite Republican rivals, Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis. We saw Trump last Sunday giving a speech at CPAC, and DeSantis was at the Reagan Library, I believe. What's the current state of play here, and where are things? It seems to me that Trump is playing a more public game, and DeSantis is playing a more behind-the-scenes game now with donors. What's your take on where things stand in that contest?
Yeah, I think you're starting to see the race take form, assuming DeSantis runs, and I think he's about 85% there, and most people think he's going to run. And what he's sort of doing, DeSantis now, is he's not ignoring Trump, but he's sort of saying, look, you can go out and you can complain and you can yell and scream and you can be a crybaby. I've actually run a decent state in Florida. I won by 20 points in 2022 after only narrowly winning in 2018. I've had tremendous successes with women voters, with minority voters. The blueprint that I used for Florida, this is DeSantis speaking now, is going to work nationwide. And you could have really good policies without all the baggage of Donald Trump. And Donald Trump is going back to the tried and true, which is to attack, attack, attack. He's trying to find a name for Ron DeSantis that sticks. He's tried Ron DeSanctimonious. That hasn't worked. Rhino Ron hasn't worked. Meatball Ron hasn't worked. So he's trying to sort of do the same thing to DeSantis that he did to Jeb Bush and others in 2016. It remains to be seen if he's going to do that. But those lines of battle are starting to sort of firm up between these two possible candidates.